Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. For those of you who are not familiar with Braving New Worlds, this is a show where I invite people who I think are making the world a better place by offering us some of their creative work. We have the founders of a devised theater company based here in Chicago called Mentalhaus. Funny enough, I met. This is going to be the second guest I've had on the show that I've met through Trader Joe's. This is going to be a really fun time. Let's give a warm welcome to Katherine and Mike. How y'all doing?
We're happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. I'm just going to lower this music down. It's a little too loud on my monitor. There we go. So happy to have you here. Really love what you're doing. And I love what brought us together. The checkout aisle over at Trader Joe's. So in a few statements, what would you say that Mentalhaus, what would be the mission of Mentalhaus?
Our mission is to provide an ensemble-based, embodied, devised theater that creates work rooted in themes of mental health.
That's extremely admirable and honorable, because mental health is something that I think is, becoming at least part of the sort of social climate and discussion. It's not so much, or at least it's becoming destigmatized, but I think creative work, and I think that's been a main vehicle of change, whether it be through film, lyrically through music. And thankfully now through theater, of course, you probably know a bunch of examples of how mental health has been addressed through theater. But what made you to decide to get into this focus with it?
So I've been doing theater for a long time, about 18 years since I was in high school. I've had, numerous experiences that have been connected to that. Which led me to wanting to build a theater company that operated a little bit differently than the traditional theater companies. I went off and did my MFA to explore these ideas and kind of unleashed my inner artist, which in that mental health became the forefront of the material that was kind of emerging from my own body. And that is because I have a very long history with different situations that have to do with mental health diagnoses or other people, interactions with people with such, or mental health policies and so forth growing up. So, when it came time, when I finished my MFA, Mentalhaus was born. And the thing about devised theater is you kind of start in a process with an idea. So we never know where the show is going to end up. But we do know that we want to speak to something that has to do with mental health. We're not trying to be political, but we are trying to give our audiences a visceral experience of what it's like to walk in the shoes of someone working through a situation from whatever angle that is.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be like working through their own mental health. It could be a story that is catalyzed by somebody sharing their journey through that, or their experience with a loved one's mental health journey. Like we want to demonstrate and show all that really mental health wellness or unwellness affects everybody, regardless whether you think it does or not. Mm-hmm. So the stories that obviously we're gonna tell stories about, our own mental health journeys, but also just the people and our loved ones who may also be affected by somebody else's mental health journey.
That's wonderful. What sort of performance techniques or sort of direction do you use with the performances you've had so far?
So technique is a hard thing to pinpoint and say, yes, I use that. But it is kind of this devised theater method that is interdisciplinary. So there's a little bit of movement. In fact, a lot of the practice that I have begins with movement. After the idea happens, I allow myself to explore it through movement. And I film that and watch it back and kind of see what emerges. So I'm specifically talking about a solo piece that I did in January called Lady M. And it was a solo piece because of COVID. And I performed it from my closet in my apartment. And that piece was based off of Lady Macbeth from the play, Shakespeare's Macbeth, exploring her process of going crazy, which I hate, when people refer to her as going crazy. Exploring what traumas could have played into this probably slow downward spiral into her ultimate death. So again, it kind of began with music and movement, and then I would write a little bit, then I would go to the play and find all the lines written about her, as well as her own lines. And kind of cycling all through that. I would draw, I would make a costume. The costume itself ended up being completely made of plastic, and all the pieces turned into puppets.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yes.
I love it.
So it's...
And they were used as puppets, as I'm sure you can imagine, but in case it wasn't clear, they were also used as puppets within the show. It wasn't just that they double as puppets for other things.
Right.
That's awesome. So I'm guessing that there's a little bit of experience with improvisation and black box theater where you had to use as many minimal elements that you brought into this sort of company. Is that right? Or am I assuming wrong?
Yes. So minimalist is certainly a choice in the final form of a piece. That one I wouldn't say was very minimalist. It was a performance still in process, even when sharing it. Because when you start from nothing creating a piece, right, it takes years and years and years to maybe get to what you might consider a final product. But this piece kind of brought in a lot of layers, metaphorical layers. Yes, someone might call it an experimental piece, and you typically find those in black boxes. And yes, there's a huge amount of improv in the exploration part of creating this story. And it's interesting to, in the solo project specifically, to find those moments of spontaneity and be able to preserve them in the same kind of spontaneity, right? That there's kind of a depth in committing to a moment. But I would say, as I mentioned before, I've been doing theater a long time, and all of it has fed into the creative process I do. All of that traditional training has fed into this process in some way, shape, or form.
So I'd love to hear about what it takes to run a theater company, especially the challenges that you had to face during the pandemic, and how it's growing currently. If you want to take that.
Well, it's in many ways it's just as hard as it sounds. In some ways it's slightly easier, and in some ways it's ridiculously harder. That's super vague, and I apologize, but I mean we're a year roughly into kind of the whole process, and it's been a really interesting journey between filing some paperwork and hearing back immediately from the state, within a week, and then filing nonprofit status paperwork and waiting almost 4 months to hear back from the federal government, where in that time, like, there were still small things that we could be doing, but we literally just had to sit and wait to see if they were going to say, yes, we recognize you as a nonprofit organization. Because if they had said no, we would have had to change trajectory a little bit in our approach. And so really just kind of, we're also doing a lot of the work ourselves, a lot of the research, if not all of it at this point, meaning any contracts, any paperwork that's had to been filed, anything logistical we've had to do and research ourselves, which, despite having gone for master's programs, in arts management for myself or in Katherine's MFA, they don't really walk you through this process. So while there's a lot of stuff that I have learned that I'm being able to apply,
right,
it's still walking through lots of pathways that have been tread before, but new to me, and trying to make sure all of those are done appropriately and correctly, and knowing that it's okay it'll be okay to backtrack if we have to at some point, but it's been a lot.
I would actually add, from the creative standpoint, Mike it operates as a managing director. I operate as the artistic director and the dreamer, right? So I'm the one like, oh, we can totally do this. It's no problem. When you decide to make a theater company, there isn't really a book on it, right? There's not some place that you can go that's like gonna tell you those first steps. But, and I hate to bring this up, when I was young and still easily molded, I guess, I had so many directors who said, you just have to go out and make it, who had really successful careers in either in repertory theaters or in film or whatever. But I always kind of resented that response.
Sure.
Just go out and make it.
Garbage
You can do
advice.
it. So part of, like, in making our theater company is the transparency and the challenges that come with, we want to make a show. We should try to make some money when we make the show, paying out of pocket, right, to support the show before we make money, and the balance of all those things in between. So fortunately, we've been able to make back through ticket sales the money we've been putting in. But it's
making money, but without focusing on the money. Like,
right.
We want the integrity of the show to be the focal point, and with the hopes that the money will come, because the money will be there to make sure that artists are paid.
Right.
It's not like we're trying to make huge amounts of profits or anything. We are a nonprofit organization, but artists deserve to be paid, and that's really what the only desire to make money is to operate and to make sure people are being paid what they're worth.
But no one ever talks about the money side of it either, which is why I'm talking about it now. Because really,
great.
If we could just make the art, right, we would just make the art and have no worries in the world. But all of those other segments are important to mention when someone's wanting to dive into this process. It is really intense, and to have a partner of some kind to help you through it really helps. Just one other person can make all the difference, but you can do it, depending on the kind of person you are, you can find ways to make it happen. And the important thing that I keep telling myself is, you have to be patient with the process, right? Because the social media age tells you it should happen overnight. And that's just not the way that the world works.
To piggyback on that, I would say definitely patient, but also you have to be proactive. And because if you're not, obviously with only 2 people, if we're not the ones doing it, it's not getting done.
Right.
So
I'm glad that you're
making the decision
mentioning
to do it.
yeah, that you're mentioning this this very real hurdle that I think is not talked about in schools. Of course, we're given so much theory. You know, I went to a creative arts school, and I think that financial literacy is the thing that is probably the biggest hurdle with anybody who's trying to make a living using creativity. And it's always going to be about facing it and learning from your mistakes. Unless you have conversations like these where someone's going to be frank about the kind of difficulties that, you know, people face when trying to do something as ambitious as running a theater company. And, you know, it's just like any well-cogged machine needs its sort of like, it needs its fuel, and fuel in this case is going to be money. So what sort of strategies have you come with finding an audience, because your performances have been virtual? What sort of outreach have you been doing on both of your ends?
So we actually have a really awesome board that's around the country. One of the benefits of starting during the pandemic was kind of embracing this virtual technology to our benefit and reaching a broader audience. And we're not really one to play it safe with, you know, one camera view of us performing in a space. Lady M, I had 2 cameras and 3 cameras, and they were layered at some points, you know, changed directions, different,
and it was all done
proximity,
live
and it was all live programmed in through OBS, as we were speaking before. That's how, you know, I live streamed the show. Sorry, I've already forgotten the question. This is like how my brain.
How are we
gets
reaching
excited.
our audiences?
Okay, so thank you.
I had to think about it for a second too.
So our board has helped us reach. They're located in Atlanta and Los Angeles. And then we have our Chicago-based audiences. And it begins with our family and friends. Like so many places, you kind of have to get them on board and hope and pray that they share with their friends they think might be interested. So we have our family and friends and our board helping us. And then on the other hand, it's social media, just trying to get our website and our information out there and hoping that people will eventually pay attention. And that goes back to the patience thing. Neither one of us are trained in marketing, but we do know what's important to us and try to put out things that are meaningful in some way.
I think that's wonderful. To anyone just joining us, quick hello to Rebel Geek. Yay, Mentalhaus, they say. And if you know Sammy, that is Sammy who's speaking. Robin,
Hi, Sammy.
Robin Neo, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm joined by the founders of Mentalhaus. If at any point you'd like to learn more about their upcoming season, auditionings, and joining their ensemble, they are a Chicago-based theater ensemble. You can put ! Mentalhaus in the check. That's Mentalhaus. I'll go ahead and throw it into the chat right now, just so you can go ahead and click that link. And there you go. Yeah, and so did either of you have to make that link with the social media? What was your experience to it beforehand? Where you didn't know about marketing really, and I didn't know about marketing when I went into marketing and I became a copywriter. You know, all of a sudden I had to start doing copywriting for this, you know, this condo building in downtown Chicago, making social media posts and blog posts. And I felt like it was a hurdle in myself because I had been writing like narrative fiction, and I had to create this new type of fiction in sort of like selling this sort of experience. So I don't know what that sort of experience was like for anybody else getting into social media.
Well, fortunately for my degree, I have taken, I wouldn't say anything crazy in depth as far as marketing but we did learn, you know, marketing strategies, particularly new media. But it's like kind of what you alluded to earlier. It's so much theory and not a whole lot of application. We did do some. And so it's really trying to adapt some of that information to a small, not even storefront theater at this point, how do you reach these new audiences? And what kind of, to piggyback off of what Katherine said earlier, it's really a lot of word of mouth at this stage in our, in Mentalhaus's existence, is the most important thing for us. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, if we post something in an online newsletter or like an online newspaper and somebody sees it, sure, that might pull them in. But if one of their friends is like, hey, I saw the show, you should come check it out, that's going to have a much bigger impact than, oh, I don't know what this random thing is in online that I saw. It's friends and family, word of mouth, and hopefully just finding more people within not only the Chicago artistic community, but kind of the global artistic community going, yeah, I like what they're saying, and spreading the word.
Our first show was pretty well attended. We had 11 states and 7 different countries watch.
Wow.
And part of that was...
Kudos.
Yes. Thank you. Part of that was because part of my MFA training took place in Berlin. So I worked with these amazing artists over there, and they showed their support by, watching this premiere show. But reaching the audiences are tough. And again, it goes back to patience and proactivity. We just kind of have to give ourselves time and be forgiving of ourselves if people aren't finding us, because there's a lot of information out there. And although we feel our work is unique in that we're approaching mental health through an embodied experience, through immersive experiences, and through engaging virtual theater in unusual ways, that,
in novel ways, not necessarily unusual.
Yes, novel ways. It's going to take some time for people to find us and dig what we're doing. It's not for everybody, but it's certainly something special.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I thought about doing things the virtual route of streaming, I didn't think of it as limiting in any way, or much of a challenge other than like finding new realms of possibility. And from that, we have a question in the chat. Are most of your productions digital? And I'd love to add to that question. Is there, or are there any aspirations to do live performances for audiences in person?
Our second show was actually a hybrid in-person and virtual performance, but I can let Katherine explain. When she first came to me with the idea of how it was going to be executed, I was so excited about it. And anybody who unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to experience it live, anybody I've told about it has been like, just had mind blown type of reactions. So I'll let her explain, but the execution was super cool.
And I have to add that I may not go into too much detail about what the show was about, simply because we, as I mentioned before, we create performances in process and share them somewhere in the process, with the hopes to, keep working on it and build it to get it to a final product a few years down the line. But this show, to answer the question, we will always have a virtual component. We've committed to always having a virtual component with our shows.
Accessibility.
And we are also committed to making sure all of our shows are subtitled or captioned in some way for the hearing impaired. Our chairman of the board is deaf, so we make sure that that our shows are accessible in that way as well. But with that said, yes, we will be doing live theater and integrating these virtual realms into that live theater. So it's never just going to be, like I said, a static screen. If you're watching from home, we try to engage you in a way that feels special and that you're connected to what's happening in the live realm. You kind of touched on this. The virtual space has infinite possibility, the same as the live space, and you can still make deep connections through a screen. And people want to resist that, but it does happen. This is why there are so many reality shows where people have fallen in love with families, or we watch people who fell in love across oceans with a screen, right?
Yeah.
But so I Consent was our second show of the season. It closed about 6-7 weeks ago, and it was a dual show. Myself and Cheryl Williams, who is a intimacy director and coordinator here in Chicago. It was hybrid in that she and I performed live in parks in Chicago. And it was virtual. All our audiences at home jumped into a Zoom webinar as a participant, or as a presenter. Is that the right word?
I think
it doesn't really matter.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, so we had people attend live who joined Zoom, and all of them recorded the show from whatever perspective they liked. And then the people at home could click through the videos and create their own adventure, basically, of what the show was. Yeah.
That's such a dynamic
so
show.
We encouraged all of the in-person viewers to
keep their video on.
To film what was happening from whatever angle, from whatever distance they wanted to, which, like Katherine said, allowed the people at home to kind of curate their own experience. Or, have the gallery view and be able to experience it all at the same time. Like,
it's overwhelming.
Yeah,
so
it's super. I thought it was super cool.
If you think about the theme, I Consent, and what it means to watch people through a screen. And we do this all the time without thinking about it, right? There's an event that happens, it's in the news. You get online and you try to find videos of it. And you're watching videos from people's different perspectives. And then you're forming your own idea of what actually happened. So that's kind of what we were recreating for our audiences. They could see each other watching us, watching them. And we also, had a big book of consent and interacted. I was asking questions to people, talking to the people at home through the cameras, as well as engaging the people who were in the space. So it was a lot of fun. It did have a bit more improv in it, with, not knowing how audiences might respond. But it was really intense subject matter, but I think we'll have a great life as we continue to explore what does it mean in today's world to give consent or blanket consent, and what does it apply to? It's more than our bodies, right? We have these videos and streams and photos and things that identities that...
And that giving blanket consent doesn't mean it's set in stone. That, at any point in time when you feel uncomfortable with the situation, you have the right to stop consenting.
Right. So, and that if you give someone permission, how do you make sure that it stops? And how do you, if you're the person being told no, how do you practice accepting that and moving on without being hurt? Because it never has to do with you, right? It's how the other person is feeling, and that should be respected. So many layers of what consent means, and it was a lot of fun to play with. Yeah,
it's incredible. So. It seems like a behemoth of a project, and probably had such an impact with audiences. And we have another question from Robin, and it's about your shows and whether or not they explore specific mental health things, like particular mental illnesses or particular situations pertaining to mental health, or is it more vague and up to interpretation?
It just depends on what emerges as we create the shows. So again, we don't necessarily start with a text. We have an idea. So I did create a show that was called Virtually Home with an ensemble. It was actually my thesis project for my MFA.
She's reading my mind.
Called Virtually Home. And that was taking the audience on a virtual tour of what it's like to be in a bipolar mind, which I have the experience. I am bipolar, and I talk about it openly, again, to destigmatize kind of what people think about mental health. But yeah, so we did a show like that. Then we did I Consent. That was kind of more how does consent play in mental health and experienced in different levels of proximity and
establishing healthy boundaries.
And then Lady M was again about trauma and how trauma affects your mental health. We have a show coming up at the end of the year in early December called Of Water and Wings. And it is actually based off of embodied research by Zoe Rose Kriegler-Vank, who is one of our ensemble members. So she's already started the research on this piece 2 years ago. So we're picking up and casting ensemble to help create a full show on this topic of empathy and exploring empathy and how we relate to each other and become desensitized and the extremes that we might go through to find that reconnection or free ourselves. So
to hop on that too, I think it's important for us. We said earlier about, we want to look at all of the avenues of mental health, whether it's personal or somebody else and how that journey affects people, but to look at the good in mental health along with the not so good. Because if we're just showing the bad stuff, I don't think that's necessarily super helpful in terms of creating these comfortable conversation spaces. We also have to show that, what a positive mental health journey can look like also.
I love that. Earlier you mentioned virtual tours. So in the spirit of virtual tours, as we continue this conversation, I'm going to show a little bit of the website while we continue.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So we're currently on the webpage. I'd love to read this quote. I think it's a great one. Your only options are to accept the boundaries that exist already or to redefine them according to your desires. I think that's a great way to preface the experience of exploring the website, which I think is very, very nice. I really like the layout. Did you get an outside company to design this, or did you have a friend make it?
I did it.
It's amazing. You did such a great job. You got the calendar right here. I love it.
She is exceptionally talented.
Thank you so much. It's a headache trying to run it, but I'm really interested in the audience experience from the moment they come to our virtual space, right, our website. And I need computer programmers who can help me live my virtual dreams in what that space could eventually look like. I have a lot of ideas, but I actually use GoDaddy templates as well and kind of use them in unusual ways, I think. But,
We've definitely, anytime she's reached out to them for support in any way, they have always responded with, wow, you do really neat stuff with this. Like they're always very impressed with what she's been able to accomplish. And then when she asks the question, like, is it possible for this to work in a way that it doesn't already? And they're like, we'll put it in. And whether it's direct influence or not, we've actually seen a lot of the things that she suggested be implemented. So that's kind of neat. Wow.
I'm just one of the hive minds,
Well, that's beautiful.
There's no new...
It's amazing to see how creativity can spill and then be created in tangible ways with something like digital spaces. There are ways that you can, I'm just like imagining what do you open the chat up for performances? Do people converse at all using the chat function on Zoom?
So in Lady M, Yes, the chat function was open. It kind of just depends on what the design of the experience is. So sometimes it's open, sometimes it's closed, depending on where the focus should be. You know, too much all at once can be too much. And with eye consent, especially with all those cameras open, it was a lot. So yeah, it just depends. I mean, when you look at our website, there's tons of places where it's like, contact us, sign up for this thing. We even have a section where it's like, if you're an actor and you're interested in auditioning for us, we don't make you wait for us to post it. You know, we just ask you to sign up and submit your stuff, and we'll send you the material when it's time, like, so that you don't have to keep coming back to us. It's just as easy for us to share that with you once it's ready. And I feel like that's also mutual respect of time, you know.
Absolutely.
Being an actor and a performer, there's so much expectation that you are the one searching out everything and having to do these searches over and over and over again. And we want to try to assist in making our experience as seamless as possible, given the skills that I have, which, you know,
Well,
it
and really,
varies.
it's what that tends to encourage is we want people to be involved who want to be involved. And so if you let us know that you want to be involved, that cuts out half of the question. And then we can be like, oh, we already know. Let's see if we can make it work. So it doesn't, like what Katherine was saying, it doesn't leave the entire onus on the actor. Like it begins a relationship with Mentalhaus and the individual right from that first
Yeah,
inquiry.
I know you mentioned it earlier that, you know, Mentalhaus isn't so much political, but just all of the Brecht bells in my head are ringing of what political theater is, and, you know, the sort of things that were going on with you know, the workers' right movement and Teatro Campesino, and just like making these experiences interactive, which I think is what brought me to Twitch and what brought me into streaming. Of, you know, at any point, you know, people can change the entire experience by asking the right question, by, you know, activating the right chat command. So I think, yeah, it's just so unbelievable. And I'd love to get into some of your creative inspirations, so sort of some of the things that inspired you growing up and some of the things that inspire you today. Either one of you would like to go first?
I mean, for all intents and purposes, she is the artistic vision. I have influence when I am an ensemble member, as all ensemble members have, you know, the ability to influence the outcome. But really, especially since we've only had the 2 shows so far, they've been really driven by her. So I'm happy to relinquish my time for her to explain hers. Very briefly, comedy stuff has always been really into what has inspired me a lot my whole life. And I was in show choir in high school. So I've been performing for a long time too, but really this is her artistic push forward right now.
It was noted to me by one of my grandmothers who noticed when I was watching Disney movies as a child, I would be upside down and singing and nailing all the notes, you know. I grew up in a house with 4 siblings, and that was kind of my happy place, is kind of singing to myself, and it was a self-soothing situation. But I was a tomboy, and I ran and climbed trees and was in nature often. I have this unique, being a millennial, right? The world was changing around us constantly, right? When we were kids, there were no really computers or cell phones like they are today, but we watched that technology develop. And so I guess I developed, you know, I literally developed with that technology. So it became a part of who I am and my identity, which is again why virtual theater seemed to make sense to me and in that change. So I'm inspired by, always making something work that you didn't expect could. And I'm inspired by nature. On my website, there's some paintings, fire, water, earth. I did all of those paintings because the elements are so core to the movement. They live inside of each one of us. And we even call our, subscribers elements, because without, they're the source of what can keep us functioning. So yeah, nature, technology. My grandmothers were, I had one grandmother who loved to sing in the kitchen when she was cooking, and one grandmother who was a voice teacher and pianist. And
Wow.
and so, and my dad is like a hilarious storyteller and draws these crazy things. And I have siblings who are sculptors and gardeners. And so I just feel like I was immersed in beauty all of the time. Not to say that I didn't have traumatizing things happen in my life, but I think that those are what inspires me as an artist. And then we get, of course, to influences, artistic influences, and my time in Berlin and Art House Berlin, where I did some intensive training, was amazing. In Los Angeles, there's Independent Shakespeare Company, run by a couple, Melissa Cholsma and David Melville, who are near and dear to my heart and kind of an inspiration couple that can make theater work. They do free Shakespeare in Griffith Park, and if anyone's in LA watching this, like, watch their stuff. I mean, and why not? It's free.
As an interjection, I'd never really got Shakespeare until I saw one of their productions for the first time because of her. Mm-hmm. They tell the stories so well that even the strange words make sense. So I totally endorse, if you are interested at all in Shakespeare and you're in Los Angeles, check it out.
Yeah, I'd say that that's part of why they're also an influence. Excuse me, I'm like, I need to take a breath. I'm so excited to talk about all of this.
We can all hydrate right now.
Let's hydrate.
Let's all hydrate. I redeem hydrate for us all.
Prost. They have a really amazing collaborative ensemble, Independent Shakespeare Company, that's inspiring. And they relate the work not just to modern society, but their community specifically. So that's what I think it has made them so successful. And that's something that we aim to do as well with our work is, we want our ensemble to reflect the community of Chicago. I have to acknowledge that we are two white people, and this is not what we want, in our ensemble, all white people, right? Because that's naturally some of the people that we know, but we want a community so that we can get a slice of what the life is and voices and experiences that are unlike ours. And it is important to tell all of those stories if we're trying to talk about mental health and the varying experiences surrounding that. We have to have that
right
in there. So
that
went from influences to
well, it's a very rich answer. I feel like there's a lot of threads that we could pull from there. But I really like the idea of this, looking for this, trying to give at least a slice of life of what these different perspectives can be. Talking about that one performance where you had audiences participate by giving their own perspectives of it. This idea of shifting modalities, I think, is very important. And I think we're becoming, or at least society is becoming more capable of shifting that modality when we talk about something as simple as summer in Chicago. Summer, for many people can be like jumping in water, hot days, and lots of joy, barbecues. But for a lot of people, summer in Chicago can be a horror story. It could be something that's very scary, and it could be very much like the experience that people had in the pandemic. You have to stay inside in order to be safe for a lot of people on the South Side, and I think that story is not being told enough.
Right.
But I think it's admirable what you're doing on that end of offering different voices, different faces, people that look like people who live in Chicago as being part of the show. So I applaud you for that. And I know how busy it is, or at least I can imagine how busy it is to run a theater company. But are there any like pieces of media, things that you thought were really doing the work that you needed to see today, that you think are making the world a better place?
I mean, I think there's an easy answer to that. For me, it is I think as far as making the world a better place, Schitt's Creek, I know it's getting a lot of attention. It has gotten a lot of attention, but I think it's very well deserved, particularly from the perspective of the LGBTQ plus communities, where it was, to poorly paraphrase things that I've read off the internet, it's like it was one of the first shows that had that identity represented, but not in a condescending or cliched way.
Right.
That it was just, this exists, everybody's comfortable with it, there were no questions about it. It just,
right.
It was part of the world because it's part of the world. And I think that was beautiful storytelling in hopes of changing the world to be better, for sure.
Terrific comedy.
That as well.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yes. Oh, we could talk about that all night. It's definitely my favorite show. When I'm doing other things, I have to have noise in the background, so that's what I'll put on. Other media that's really, I think I have a love-hate relationship with TikTok. I think it's really fun in that it gets people kind of playing again, seeing these family members bring their kids, bringing them into these TikToks and doing family engaged little pieces of art, I guess. And I think that that's really wonderful to see these little communities coming together. But at the same time, it like sucks you in, and before you know it, little
3 hours later,
which I think everyone can relate to. Also things like this, like what you're doing, interviewing the unseen, unheard folks in the creative world. I really believe in that, lifting people up who maybe just haven't been able to have conversations and kind of introduce themselves to the world. I think that that's important. Community building, and that's really important to us. Other shows and things, I have a really embarrassing addiction to reality TV.
Oh, that's great. I love we can talk about reality TV.
Man, it's
Tiny Home Living. Don't get me started.
Oh, Tiny. Yes. I mean, do you just go and say like, oh, I should totally downsize and do this, and then reality sets in? I mean, I feel that way all the time.
Yeah, most of the time it's like me putting things in boxes that can't be seen. It's like it's still there, but it's just like I'm pocketing everything into smaller spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a large individual, so trying to pack me into a tiny space isn't really an option.
And we have 2 cats and a dog. It's just not logistical, but it's fun to dream. And
absolutely,
it's us as a theater artist who has spent my life trying to make fictional characters alive, like try to bring them to life. Watching real people become kind of a fictionalized version of themselves through reality TV is really intriguing to me. So I'll like pick a series and then just watch their life kind of evolve or devolve as like their popularity gains. And it's like this really weird thing to witness, to see how this, how it affects them.
Definitely. Rebel Geek in the chat says, I want a full bathroom. That's all I want. And I could definitely relate.
Yeah.
I want to have a bath. I would love a nice bath.
That's, that's a joke in the device theater world, is like, you haven't made a device theater show until you have a bathtub on the stage. I don't know. I mean, I get it. There's something about
she gets it because she's had a
I've
bathtub
had
on
a
the
bathtub
stage
on the
multiple
stage
times.
a few times. But there's something in the renewal and like cleansing ritual that is a great, metaphor in so many different ways for device theater. So next time you watch a device theater show, I guarantee you there's going to be a bathtub, and it's going to be wonderful.
Hopefully it'll be wonderful.
Bathtubs or hot tubs have a different context on Twitch, where that's its own category of streamers. You only stream from bathtubs and hot tubs. So,
oh, well, how about that? Maybe if we ever get a hot tub, maybe I'll stream from a hot tub, but maybe I don't know what the context is there. So maybe I'll just.
It's literally just people sitting in hot tubs and talking to people.
That would be my jam. Yes.
Yeah. Just don't show your feet. It might get weird.
No. There's no might about that. It won't get weird.
It gets weird when you show your feet.
People
I'm
like
learning
feet
new things.
a lot.
Welcome to the dark side of the internet.
Yes.
Well,
I
do work barefoot, so I will keep that in mind. Maybe not to have my feet in, I don't know. That's a lot to think about. That's too much to unpack right now, probably.
So we're at about close to an hour, so I think we can close up with maybe a few words, if you all have, to anybody who is creatively inclined, or at least maybe maybe an actor, maybe someone who wants to start their own theater company, who is maybe facing issues with mental health or facing their own challenges. Words that they can use to strive forward with.
Yes.
I love the ones that we actually put on like a title slide for Lady M, which was it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
And that there are resources there for you always.
That's around a lot. It's okay not to be okay, but
it's one of my favorites.
And if you are feeling that you're not okay, to seek someone to speak to, whether it's a therapist or a doctor, to find help. As far as your artistry, I lead a class called The Artist Conscience. That's usually once a month. I've kind of fallen behind for 2 months, which will mean I'll have double classes coming up. And they're only $5, and it's like you can come in there and you learn a process of making art, and then we talk about like how it resonated with ourselves, and allow open space to just say, like, I've been struggling with this. One of our topics of discussion was imposter syndrome, and it was a room full of people who I would say are very successful in their artistic careers, who just feel like imposters. And those are legitimate experiences, and we create a safe space to speak about that. And hopefully it helps support the fact that you may be an artist and you may have mental health things, but you don't have to hide it or ignore it.
Or face it alone if you don't want to.
Or face it alone, that there's going to be a medical professional who can help you. And then there's an artistic community where you can make and work through things yourself. But may I mention this festival that we have coming up on July 31st?
Whatever you'd like. I'm also going to throw a link in the chat once more to your website. You can also tell us how people can support Mentalhaus. Go ahead.
Cool. Thank you. So we are collaborating with another new Chicago-based theater company. They're called Thumbprint Studios, and it's a joint venture 24-hour festival for devised theater. We are producing the first annual festival on July 31st, and tickets are on sale now. So if you go to the Mentalhaus website, there's a link that will take you to tickets. But it's going to be super fun. It's modeled after a 24-hour film festival. So these 4 groups work with their directors to devise a piece, and we throw 3 challenges at them at some point in those 24 hours. And the audience will get to help vote for the audience favorite
great.
for a prize in the end. So, and then there's a Q&A as well at the end of the process. So that's July 31st. And then if you're an artist of any discipline, we're looking for singers, poets, musicians, dancers,
Fine
arts. If you are a creator or maker and you think that you might want to try making some devised theater with us, we're having auditions for our ensemble next month. And all of the information is on our Become a Collaborator page under Ensemble. So I hope that you'll consider auditioning for that. It should be a good time. And then, of course, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we appreciate donations. We will be hitting our 1-year anniversary soon, and hope to continue creating and make our shows bigger and better and more artistically inspiring among ourselves, and engage our audience in greater ways. So supporting us supports the dream.
Incredible. Thank you so much for being here and being part of the stream. You are always welcome to come on by. I love the conversations that we have, and maybe we can talk about explore more themes around mental health in theater as well. And if you ever need a place, like a landing page, in order to host something that involves Twitch, just let me know. I'd be more than happy to lend my expertise in any sort of way.
Thank you.
So yeah, y'all have a great night. I'm gonna outro us with some music. Thanks everybody for stopping by and for all the questions.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night,
you for
everyone.
having us.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Bye.